ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait. Because it's gonna take a long, long time, a long, long time for kudos. So watch it come on so slow, so slow, so slow, so slow. Now you may tell me it's ADHD, and yeah, that may be. If you hang out, you'll see that this is a long debate, and you're gonna have to wait because it's gonna take a long, long time for kudos to watch it all so slow, so slow.
I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. Oh, answer. Answers. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. The answer. I'm just curious. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. I'm just curious for the corporation of the answer.
Rejected outright, the partition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The out of sight, rejected outright, the partition resolution. Get you out of sight, rejected outright, the petition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. Get out of sight, rejected outright, the petition resolution. I won't play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The Arab side rejected outright, but play games with that. I know a lot of people try to prove it's not true. It clearly, in my view, is true. The Arab side rejected outright, the partition resolution.
Norman Finkelstein, Moin Rabbani are on one side, and Pestiny for the pro-Israel side. And one of the funny little dumb things that Destiny keeps, that not only is it an argument he made, it's an argument he makes. First hour and 20, he throws in these little quotes, he cherry picks little things, and he accuses the other side of cherry picking and using isolated quotes out of context. He also accuses the Arabs as having both past and present an inability to engage in diplomacy, and they only use tools of war. and that they, quote, always gave the Jews a reason or an excuse to fight and acquire land because of that way, or through that way, because of their refusal to negotiate on anything. He also just kind of like lazily like name drops a few things that he doesn't get into. He doesn't say much about this Lausanne Peace Conference. And then just, again, whatever happened there, and he says because the Arabs don't want a Jewish state anywhere. Some people don't look at all the facts, right? That's basically his this is actually my summary of what he said. Don't want to confuse that with his words. But this was basically his line of reasoning. He said, some people don't look at all the facts. Some people cherry pick to support their political views. Arabs can't engage in diplomacy. They only use tools of war. The expulsion was their own fault. He also highly implies that it still is their fault, right? So one of the big ugly things that cropped up during hour 1, and yes, I know we're on hour 2, but in order to make sense of hour 2, we have to reference hour 1. All right, so this hour went on. The next time Pestiny talked, that was his opening statement. The next time he talks was here. I'll respond to that, and then a question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious. Obviously, I have fresher eyes on this, and I'm a newcomer to this arena versus the three of you guys, for sure. A claim that gets brought up a lot has to do with the inevitability of transfer in Zionism, or the idea that as soon as the Jews envisioned a state in Palestine, they knew that it would involve some mass transfer of population, perhaps a mass expulsion. Okay, everything that I just read there, from a claim that gets brought up a lot. A claim that gets brought up a lot. Do you mean the fucking thesis of this debate? Of at least this part of the debate? It's not a claim that gets brought up. It's the argument that Moin Rabbani was just saying to your fucking face. To frame it as a claim that gets brought up, arguing that has been being argued. I think we're like 40 minutes into the debate at this point. And he's like, I have fresher eyes on this. No, you just aren't paying attention to anything. And then Plan Dalit, or Plan D. He is just dropping his in vocabulary to try to impress the professors. In the first one, he's like, oh, maybe at the Lausanne Accords, right? He's like, oh, I memorized all the like UN Accords throughout the decades, and then I could just rattle those off really fast and just say, every time that there was a peace deal on the table, the Arabs rejected it, right? Assuming that the only table for deals to be on is this UN bullshit, right? So he's like, he takes so many words just to say, I'm going to finally respond to this argument that transfer is inevitable in Zionism. And he goes, the issue that I run into is, and I'm paraphrasing here, is that while you have evidence, I have feelings. And I don't think that Jews would have, I don't think the Jews would have expelled the Arabs if the Arabs had been peaceful instead. He says, you may have evidence. He says, while you can find quotes from leaders, while you can find maybe desires expressed in diaries, but how up and having zones, parts of the whole parts of the country, including their village or half of their village or whatever the fuck, that would be now considered Jewish land, which means they have to stay off of it. And it's like, bro, I've got a fucking orchard of olive trees that have existed for 400 years that my great-grandpa's great-grandpa fucking planted. I'm not going to just get up and move, you dick. It's not a deal. It's not a peace deal on the table. It's a threat of violence. If you're gonna put a border in the middle of some land where there's no border naturally there, the only way to make that a reality is to put up a fucking fence and enforce it with deadly force. And you must have a monopoly on violence, otherwise some other people are just going to come up and kill those guys who are guarding the fence. So you have to be able to back it up with like state level power to point. Rabbani characterizes the partition plan as the Jews and the live side by side with anybody who is a border in between you. That's not what side by side means. It's an act of violence to put borders to... Okay. And then he has a question. Okay. And then he has a question. This is the question he says that he's curious about. A question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny, because I am curious. A question for Norm to take into account, I think, when he answers Benny. So, hey, Norm, when you answer Benny, I want you to take this question into account. Here's the question. Ready? 47 partition plan that would have had a huge Arab population living in the Jewish state. Is your contention that... Okay, remember, he says, I have this question for Norm, and I want Norm to really consider this. Norm, I want you to take this into account. Hey, Norm, inconvenient fact here for you. Accepted the 47 partition plan, and that would have had a lot of Arabs living there. Dummy. You dick. Norm had a lengthy opening statement, but he had a pretty short conclusion. His conclusion could be summed up in one sentence. And that sentence is... This is not a side was committed to the letter of the partition resolution, and both sides aborted it. Did not abide by the partition resolution. They immediately expanded the fucking borders out and did a Nakba. They expelled a bunch of... That's what we're talking about. This is all about the Nakba, the giant ethnic cleansing displacement of the Arab population. The area that we call Israel now, I'm concerned, is occupy all these Arab citizens from their country. Or how do you explain that in Lausanne a couple years later that Israel was willing to formally annex the Gaza Strip and make 200,000 or so? Of course it was. We've talked at length about this. The offer to formally annex the Gaza Strip. Oh, that's such a generous offer. Thank you so much, Israel. I'm so happy that you did that. Like, this whole question, how do you explain the acceptance of this? Is it your contention that after the establishment of that state, the Jews would have slowly started to expel? Bro, what kind of question is this? After the establishment of the state, they'd expel all those Arabs from their country. That's what they did. Idea. Whether or not the Arabs fought back, I don't know. That you could argue that would have made it go slower or faster. You could also argue that that's a nonsensical premise. of like, well, what if like never fought back? What if people just kind of like relaxed and were like very understanding? Like imagine those kind of like very, very like people pleaser kind of pushovers, and like someone busts into their house and they're like, oh, yes, yes, sorry. Oh, come in, yes, yes. Oh, I'm sorry about the mess. Oh yeah, no, yeah, okay, yeah, you can take that. Okay, good. Are you happy with that? I can get you another one if you want. Oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're taking the farm. Okay, good. Well, I sure hope it's a big enough farm for you, right? Like that's what they're expecting. Like these people who are just gonna be like, yeah, oh no, it's yours. Yeah, take it. You obviously need it a lot more than I do. Looks like you got you're bringing lots of your friends and family all around. No, it's okay. Don't mind me. Well, I guess I'll try to go to Egypt or Jordan or something. I heard that the people that live there are also called Arabs, and that's what I am. So I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure I'll just blend right in there. No problem. Let me get out your way. Yep. Sorry. And again, sorry for the mess. But you guys have a good one here, and you won't see me back again. I have a policy. I never try to return to places that I was honestly rightfully kicked out of. Because I've been needing to. I was getting a little stir crazy here on my family farm, and I just thought, oh yeah, okay, this is probably great. I'll just fuck off, and sure hope those other nations let me in as a refugee. Anyway, that's not your problem though. I've already said too much. I'll be out of here. So if that happened, if the Arab population didn't fight back, is it your contention that they would have still been expelled, but slowly? And then he says later, but how do you explain that in the Lausanne a couple years later? Okay, so now he's describing an event that happened after the Nakba, accepted a state that would have had a massive, now not even sizable, or what was the other word? Sizable. This is massive. Yeah, this is massive population. And then he says, is that a question for me or Norm? And he says, to either one. I'm just incorporation of the answer. Yeah. Stephen, if you remembered the words that came out of your own mouth, you said that was a question for Norm. You said you're going to respond to Moin Rabbani, because you said that Arabs don't know how to do diplomacy. They only know war. So he's giving him two different counterpoints. Basically, he's talking about the night conducted by the Palestinians at the beginning of the revolt, right? Kind of just describing an instance where before a full-scale revolt and war, there had structured peaceful attempts to get to resolve conflict, including the longest recorded general strike in history at the time. So that's a great big counterpoint to your does that Arabs just don't know how to do anything except war. They can't do any other kind of negotiating. Rabbani also that a book by an author called Laurie Allen, A History of False Hope, discusses in great detail the consistent engagement by Palestinians, their leaders, their elites, their diplomats, and so on, with all these international committees. Remember, I think a while back we were reading the Wikipedia about the UN resolutions, and Wikipedia had the line of like, the Arab side refused to participate. It sounded very interesting to me. It didn't sound as objective. Because it was just like this kind of quick, I don't know. While it tries to be balanced, it does skew centrist. And centrist is not the same as balanced in terms of, even just because you're balanced for bias doesn't mean you have to outright lie or omit facts, but whatever. But I had a suspicion that it was less about the Arabs not wanting to participate and the Arabs being left out or dismissed or given offers that were dismissed or given offers that were not even realistic. Going to sign the deal. If you're not going to sign the deal, we're going to do it anyway. Okay, well then why the fuck would I sign the deal if you're gonna fucking do it anyway? Because if you didn't sign it, we'll kick your ass and we're gonna go well beyond the deal. Palestinians are going to the International Court of Justice. They're consistently trying to persuade the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to do his motherfucking job. Widespread boycott campaigns. The suggestion that this has always been their first and last resort, that they have spurned diplomacy, I think really has no basis in reality. God damn it, Rabbani, you're so sweetheart about this. Say, that's bullshit, you dick fuck. Say, hey, you're a racist fucking moron. And this shit has no basis in reality. Okay? In other words, it's bullshit. It's beyond bullshit. It's just literally some fucking shit you made up. You literally haven't looked at us, ignoring everything, not even bothering to open up a book, not even bothering to like check, well, did Palestinians ever attempt to do any kind of diplomacy? Any kind of civic action? Has that ever happened? Who cares? Just say that they don't know how to do it and they never did it. Pfft, easy. And then when your debate opponent very, very diplomatically corrects your dumbass, you said, I'll respond to that. And then a question for Norm, because I am so curious. Blah, blah, blah. I have fresh eyes on this. You know, a lot of people, and then he's like, you know, this claim. Now, I said before that he was responding to a claim that Rabbani made. He did make that claim, but that's not what he was saying to. What he said to Stephen was, hey, you dumb motherfucker. You just said that Arabs only know how to do war and they never do diplomacy or civic action. Well, here's some fucking instances of that. And by the way, everything you said is dog shit and not based in reality. Okay, so then Stephen says, I'll respond to that. Are you going to respond to that at all? No, he's going to go back and talk about the inevitability of transference. What we were talking about. That's what they were talking about before. That's basically the main topic for the first hour, is that transfer is inevitable in Zionism. They always had the idea of doing transfer. I'm sure we'll talk about Plan Dalet or Plan D at some point, and then doesn't talk about it. Okay, great. The issue I run into, and then he spends this many hours, Arabs rejected the partition resolution. Well, golly, I'm sure your debate opponents are shaking in their boots to hear that. And he says, how can you say it was inevitable to Zionism how can you say that transfer was inevitable in Zionism if they were willing to accept the partition plan? Remember, they weren't willing to follow the partition plan. They were just willing to accept it and have the, obviously, feature of the accepting of the partition plan was becoming a fucking state and obtaining that monopoly of power in order to enforce your borders. They could put the borders wherever the fuck they wanted. So Stephen does not respond to that. Hey, Stephen, he just said you're a fucking racist dickhead idiot. What do you, he says, I'll respond to that. And then a question for Norm. So he doesn't respond to that. All he does is this. The issue I run. All of this is preamble to his question. This is all preambling to the question of how do you explain the acceptance? Is it your contention that mass transfer when there were times early on when they would have had a massive marriage population? Is it your idea that they would have just slowly expelled them afterwards? Or is that questioner to me or Norm? To either one. Destiny doesn't even give a fuck about his own. He's not arguing coherently. When he says, I actually have a question for Norm that I'm really curious about the answer. No, he's not. No, he doesn't. He doesn't have a question for Norm. He's not curious about the answer. This is one of his most blatant lies. I am curious. I'm just so curious about the answer, sir. Oh, I really want to know what your answer is to this curious question I have. I just find it so confusing. And you know what's especially true is when he's not just curious for the answer, he's curious for the incorporation of the answer. Right? He's just babbling. Babble. Rephrase the same question 4 times while your opponents are literally answering it because your questions were formed. You fucked up by asking a yes/no question. Right? Is it your contention that after the acceptance that of the establishment that say that Jews would have slowly started to expel? Or how do you explain the right? He says, of course it was. Of course it was the plan. I'm just curious, how do we get this idea? So he's just plowing through, basically saying, no, your thesis, the thesis that you, my opponents, have been building can't be true. Why? Because of the 47 partition resolution, which he earlier said is something that people never want to talk about. So big brain coming up with the smarty smart stuff. He's so curious for the incorporation of the answer. That's how geniuses get information, you know? Like a dumb guy will be like, I want to know the answer. But a smart guy will say, I'm just curious for the incorporation of the answer. That's how you know you're dealing with a smarty smart pants. All right. The next time that Destiny opens his dumb fucking mouth comes around 50 minutes. He didn't give us much in the first hour. We have so much to talk. We probably talked about him for an hour. Just from this first hour. You know? I think there's a problem with my stream. Are we still on the air? Are we streaming? Are you streaming? Are you streaming, Brother John? What is going on? Yeah, thank you. All right, anyway. So now this is 50 minutes into Destiny. He's helping Benny Morris and Lex derail Norm Finkelstein, who's currently just handing Benny his fucking ass. He's like, boom, bam, big bam, boom, beating him with his own book. He's beating his ass, and Lex has to step in. Says, whoa, 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 whoa. You may be taking those quotes out of context, don't you think? By the way, Lex, an inbuilt into Zionism. And he's using 4 pages from the first edition of the book and 25 pages from the second edition of the book, written by Benny Morris, where he documents at great length this idea, this principle. And it's not that he can pull one quote or 2 quotes. It's that he can refer to this entire body, and he can pull examples, and we could just go examples all day and all day and all day, right? That's his point. He's not cherry picking. He's describing the totality, the thesis of these 25 pages. Inevitable. Inbuilt. Inevitable. Inbuilt. All right. So we skip forward. That's about 50 minutes. The next time that Destiny talks is into hour 2. So now we're current. We're talking about hour 2. And in hour 2, 3 minutes, 45 seconds into the second hour, Steven's turn. No, actually, so he it's not Steven's turn. It's Rabbani's turn. But he's addressing a point made by Stephen. He says, if Palestinians and the Arabs would have rejected any partition resolution, yeah, I think, and a couple of things. One, they would have rejected any. 2, a lot of the land that was given in the Negev, it was pretty terrible land at the time. And 3, Jews, I think would have been, I saw it would have been 500,000 Jews, 400,000 Arabs, and I think like 80,000 Bedouins, pretty closely. So he's ready to, he's got his little facts. He's like, they would have rejected any. 2, a lot of that land was given in the Negev. That land was given in the Negev. It was pretty terrible land at the time. I can't even. What is this? What? A lot of land that was given in the Negev. And remember, Rabbani is in the middle of his point, and he's just trying to confirm that that's what Stephen is arguing. If I understood you correctly, would have rejected any partition resolution. Would have rejected any partition resolution. Desert and semi-desert region of southern occupied Palestine. A lot of the land that was given in the Negev was pretty terrible land at the time. Okay? What is this point? They rejected the partition resolution. What, even though the Jews just wanted the shitty desert part? A lot of that land was in the desert, and that's terrible land. Why is it terrible? Just because it's a desert? I mean, I can see not wanting to put a city, in a box canyon or something, but maybe that's why it was a lot of it. I don't know. The fact that the UN General Assembly awarded the majority of their homeland to the Zionist movement only added insult to injury. And he says, can you name any country, yours for example, or yours, that would be prepared to give 55, 25, 10% of your country to the Palestinians? I would. I would, if it was up to me, I would literally give 25% of the U.S. to Palestinians. Literally, I would. I'd be like, all right. You can have all of Utah. It's yours. Fuck it up. Drive the fucking Mormons out. Do whatever you want. We don't care. We're not looking. We will provide you with all the military support you need. So the issue was not the existence of Jews in Palestine. They didn't have a problem with having Jews in Palestine. They had been there for centuries. And of course, they had ties to Palestine, and particularly Jerusalem, and other places going back centuries, if not millennia. But the idea of establishing an exclusively Jewish state at the expense of those who are already living there, it was right to reject that. Now, these guys are going to... Rabbani's going to say, that word you're using, exclusively, that's so wrong, right? That word exclusive is nonsense, because there's going to be a minority of Arabs there that won't have equal rights. That will be lesser. That will be second-class citizens. That will be apartheid from the 500,000 Jews. Even if this was fucking correct, this is what they accepted. Ben-Gurion envisioned. Oh. It's getting ridiculous. All right. So Stephen responds to this whole idea of like that accepting any kind of partition for an exclusively Jewish state was not even something to consider. Was not worthy of even considering. So he says, sure. So I like that answer more than what I usually feel like I'm hearing when it comes to Palestine and the rejection of the 47 partition plan. So stalling. So Stephen's stalling because he did not expect that Rabbani, because he wasn't listening to either of their opening statements. If he was, he wouldn't be surprised, but he's surprised. And Rabbani brilliantly told him he raised a valid point. You're right, Stephen. They would have rejected any percentage of partition. And then he says, so I like that answer more. He likes it so much more that he sidesteps it. And he just talks about how other people don't make that argument. Because sometimes I feel like a weird switch happens to where the Arabs in the area are actually presented as entirely pragmatic people who are simply doing a calculation and saying like, well, we're losing 55% of our land. Jews are only maybe 1/3 of the people here, and we've got 45, and nah, the math doesn't work out, basically. But it wasn't a math problem. I think, like you said, I mean, that's just a full 20 seconds of just sputtering non-response. Rabbani just made a very nice case as to why it's absolutely absurd to think that it was a good idea to, quote unquote, accept the partition. As non-Jews, why would they accept that? And how could they have foreseen what the fuck was going to happen? So, Rabbani cuts him off, says it was a matter of principle. He's just restating he did it in so many words, and they were very beautiful words, and they were very well-reasoned words. He laid out a beautiful argument. You argue with some other person who's not here, and then as soon as he restates it, it's a matter of principle. You say it was an ideology problem. Talk about, like, different ways. Like, if I say, no, in principle, I will not allow you to divide my house. I don't care if I get most of it. I don't care. You can't divide it. I'm not allowing you to do that. In principle, I don't agree with dividing houses. Oh. Well, he didn't agree to let me divide his house because he has an ideology problem. An ideology problem? It was a problem? It was a problem. Where did they get this weird ideology of, like, keeping their home? Ideology problem. Rabbani says, no, it was a matter of principle. It was not an ideology problem. It was a matter of principle. And then he goes, yeah, like he's agreeing. Yeah, ideologically driven. Right? So using this, like, little slippery language of, like, principle, ideology. Okay, kind of similar. If you have an ideology that would have principles in it, you know. But this obviously gives it a very negative connotation. It swings it. Like, Stephen would love to, instead of someone saying, I refuse to do this as a matter of principle, you could make it sound worse by saying, well, he refused to do it because of his right? Ideology. That's why, you know, weird religious parents, like, don't let their kids get medical care. Ideology. Right? But principle. That's when people stand up for those who need it. Principle. Right? So these obviously have, like, connotations. And Rabbani did not allow that. He says, no, it's not an ideology problem. It was a matter of principle. Giving up your house. He just said it. The idea that we wouldn't be prepared to divide our country and give it to you, right? And then he pretends to agree. Yeah, ideological driven. That they as a people, and here's his definition of this ideology, that they can somehow just bypass the formalities of sending representatives to the United Nations in New York City and participating in this thing where they're going to chop your land up and decide where the Arabs are allowed to only go and which ones aren't allowed to go there anymore. And because you didn't do that, you think that you're, like, entitled to this land that you live at just because your fucking great-grandparents planted the fucking olive trees that you make a living out of raising and harvesting? You think you have a right to that? What kind of ideology is that? What a strange ideology. He says, as if it's three things: never had an independent state, never had even a guarantee of an independent state, and then never actually ruled a government. All of that is bullshit. Slightly, the whole idea of an independent state technically is something that's defined by the other states, whether something is a state or not. I would argue it was a people, it was a nation, it was a place with people on it. But that's just me. They did actually have a guarantee of an independent state. And they've had many different committees and boards and congresses. They get jerked around a lot by the international. They get jerked around a lot by the international community. That's one of the things. They're just fourth. Okay. Rabbani corrects him. He says that last point is not correct. Okay. Rabbani corrects him. He says that last point is not correct. The class territory. It was called the British Mandate of Palestine. Stephen says, no, it's of what would emerge from that territory, but not of the Palestinians. It was for the territory itself, people who were living on it. He says the territory itself, but not of the Palestinian people to have a right or... Okay, the territories of Palestine and Transjordan, which had been part of the Ottoman for 4 centuries. Okay. International agreement in Palestine. Clement Lloyd George Agreement of the previous agreed international administration of Palestine under the Sykes-Picot Agreement. God damn it, there's just always all these agreements and treaties and commissions. There's so much. Just nobody should be having their fucking... This shouldn't... Why is Britain in League of Nations? Why are they fucking around? Just stop. They just have to fucking stop. Just tell them to fucking stop. Just tell them to all fucking stop and chill. Just chill and stop. Stop making fucking agreements. Stop fucking dividing up land. Stop colonizing shit. It sucks so fucking bad. It sucks so fucking bad to do this to people. In Palestine, the mandate required Britain to put into effect the Balfour Declaration's national home for the Jewish people alongside the Palestinian Arabs, who compose the vast majority of the local population. This requirement and others, however, would not apply to the separate Arab emirate to be established in Transjordan. The British controlled Palestine for almost 3 decades, overseeing a Jewish and Palestinian Arab communities during nationalist movements, the Jews and the Palestinian Arabs. The intercommunal conflict in Mandatory Palestine ultimately produced the 36 to 39 Arab Revolt and the 44 to 48 Jewish and... Wait a minute. Are you saying that in 47 and 48 that the Jewish people were being militant too? I thought they were just being... According to Benny Morris, they were just chilling and the Arabs started the war. Okay, so this was the Zionists attacking the British. Whatever, we'll get into this more later. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole. We're well past an hour. We haven't even watched. Okay. We're gonna relax. We're gonna do our hour 2 recap probably a few different times. What we were doing is kind of following through the line of just Stephen Bonnell, what he's been doing. So he just makes up this thing about how, like, no, it was of the territory, but not for the people in the territory. Then, at an hour and 8 minutes, Stephen comes in and says, real quick, I just want for both of you guys answered. Boop, boop. Boop, boop. Got his ass. Yeah. Yeah, of course they want to be an imperial stooge. Yeah. What? Okay, and? But then, the question I go back to, if that is true, if Ben-Gurion in the early Israel saw themselves at... What the fuck? What is going on with my stupid... Alright. It's like resizing it, a million pages. But then the question I go back to, if that's true, if Ben-Gurion, if the early Israel saw themselves as a Western fashion nation, how could we possibly imagine that they would have engaged in the transfer of some 400,000 Arabs after accepting a partition plan? Would that not have completely and totally destroyed their legitimacy in the eyes of the Western world? No. Would there not have been? How not? So he gets his answer. Dude, he spins these yarns just going on and on and on, explaining the question, the preamble to the question. It was brought up that Ben-Gurion had an obsession with Western validation. Yes, exactly. But then the question is this. But he has to preamble it again. But the question, again, I go back to, if that is true, if Ben-Gurion, like, just, you already did all that. Like, you literally set up the question, then you answered it. Would it not have completely and totally destroyed their legitimacy? No. How not? How not? How not, he asks. Well, here's how not. First of all, the Zionist leadership accepted the partition resolution, that they accepted it because it provided international endorsement of the legitimacy of the principle of Jewish statehood. They didn't accept the borders, and in fact, later expanded the borders. Which, no, they didn't. They accepted it, borders and all. Yeah, bitch. And then they expanded the borders because they didn't ever intend on honoring the letter of the partition resolution. And it's not going to destroy the legitimacy in the eyes of the Western nations if you expel a bunch of brown people from your country. That's actually kind of what you have to do to be part of the club. It's like joining a gang. You want to be part of the gang? You got to genocide one indigenous people on your land. Come on, man. Australia did it. Canada did it. What, Israel? Aren't you going to do it? Or are you too pussy? All right. So Destiny keeps his mouth shut for a little while after that. But I actually stopped color coding this at some point. But where we left off was at about... Oh boy, this is another Destiny dummy part. But you know, we're already like a fucking hour and 15 into the stream. I think it's time to get back to the actual debate. So where are we? We're at I'm gonna roll it back to 124. Oh yeah, okay. 124. This was what I was trying to get to. So I started writing my notes here in yellow. Just because sometimes I'm reading through this and I get some idea I want to talk about. So, yeah, we spent a long time talking about his conflation of people with people. A people, one people, two peoples are referring to groups of people, nationalities, ethnic groups, people of a common language and culture. Right? Norm says, no people that I am aware of would voluntarily cede its country. Destiny chimes in with, except for all the people that sold land voluntarily. People. Pestiny is conflating people with peoples. Right? A person or a few people in a place selling a plot of land is not the same thing as desiring to make that land not your country anymore. Like when a realtor sells a house, they're not like, hey, I just sold this house to that guy. Wouldn't it be great now then to just sell like everything? How about the whole country now is sold away and then I have to fuck off? Like conflating the idea of land sales, selling a fucking land plot, selling a fucking house in a city has anything to do with putting up a giant fucking partition in the middle of your country and only allowing Jews on one side of it. Not the same thing. All right, now what we're getting into is Benny Morris and Norm Finkelstein talking about anti-Semitism, and they're starting to get a little heated. So we're excited. So let's take it to let's go 124.50, 124.30. Fine. We'll check that out. And I'm going to make sure our audio is working.
Country.
Except for all the people that sold land voluntarily.
You can perfectly understand Native American resistance to Euro-colonialism. You can perfectly well understand it without any anti-Europeanism, anti-whiteism.
Of the Palestinian Arab national movement.
Why is it?
And he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone.
Why is it that if you read your book, Righteous Victims, you can read it and read it and read it and read it, as I have, you will find barely a word about the Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism. It doesn't exist.
You agree that it exists.
Hey, I don't know a single non-Jew who doesn't harbor anti-Semitic
We're
sentiment.
talking about Arabs now.
Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's just part of the human condition. That's just part of the human condition.
Anti-Semitism.
Yes,
Husseini was an ordinary
and among the Arabs.
So, Professor Morris, here's my problem. I didn't see.
Why does Benny Morris say anti-Semite? He said Husseini was an anti-Semite. The leader of the Palestinian national movement in the 30s and 40s was an anti-Semite. Let's hear that again.
There's anti-Christianism. They didn't want to cede their country to invaders.
I think
that's completely understandable.
You're minimizing the anti-Semitic element.
You minimized it.
In Arab nationalism.
In all your books, you minimized.
No. The Husseini was an anti-Semite. The leader of the Palestinian national movement in the 30s and 40s was an anti-Semite. This was one of the things which drove him.
Anti-Semite. I've never heard that pronunciation of it.
Anti-Semite. Anti-Semite.
Anti-Semite. Anti-Semite.
Semite.
I mean, whatever. I'm fine with it being called Semite, but I just don't. I've never heard that. So, this guy, Husseini, was an anti-Semite. Mohammed Amin al-Husseini was a Palestinian Arab and Muslim leader. What is a Semite? Member of any peoples who speak or spoke a Semitic language, including in particular the Jews and the Arabs. People in the Middle East, Arabs, Jews, Akkadians, and Phoenicians. Semitics. Semitic people. So, this guy who is a Semitic is an anti-Semite. Does that mean he's a self-hating Semite? Is that what you would say? Was he self-hating? Because he himself is a Semite, as Benny pronounces it. He is a Palestinian Arab and Muslim leader in mandatory Palestine. He received education in Islamic, Ottoman, and Catholic schools. He pursued Salafist religious studies, a fundamentalist revival movement within Sunni Islam. He served in the Ottoman army. He stationed himself in Damascus as a supporter of the Arab Kingdom of Syria. Moved back to Jerusalem, shifting his pan-Arabism to a form of Palestinian nationalism. He opposed Zionism, and as a leader of the 1920 Nebi Musa riots, was sentenced for 10 years imprisonment, but pardoned by the British. Some British guy appointed him the Grand Mufti, the Sunni Muslim cleric in charge of Jerusalem's Islamic holy places, a position he used to promote Islam while rallying a non-confessional Arab nationalism against Zionism. Is this why he's described as anti-Semite? Because he's against Zionism? Because so far, I haven't read anything that indicates that he's an anti-Semite, other than that he opposes Zionism. During 1921 to 1936, he was considered an important ally by the British authorities. Ooh. That's not good. His appointment by the British for the role of Grand Mufti of all Palestine, a new role established by the British. Hey, guess what? We just invented this new thing. Before you were the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, how'd you like to be the Grand Mufti of all Palestine? Eh? Eh? That'd be cool. We just invented it. You get to be that. Help divide the Palestinian leadership structure and national movement. From the 100 Years' War on Palestine by Rashid Khalidi. I think I've heard about this book. Page 42, 43. Does that happen to be in the sample? Probably not. But they're saying when this motherfucker got appointed as the Grand Mufti, It helped divide the Palestinian leadership and its national movement. Is that something that happened, without his intention? Is that something he intended to do? Or is that something he didn't realize he was going to do? Did he feel the same way about his appointment? What did he think it meant to be considered the Grand Mufti of all Palestine? It's like the Pope. It's like you could be Palestine Pope. I don't know. I don't know. In 1937, evading an arrest warrant for aligning himself as a leader of the Arab revolt against British rule, he fled and took refuge in Lebanon and afterwards in Iraq. So something happened. He was the Grand Mufti of all Palestine. The British loved him. He was considered an important ally. But then they issued an arrest warrant for him because he said he was a leader of this Arab revolt. So he fled to Lebanon and then Iraq. He then established himself in fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. Oh, shit. Oh, okay. I think I see what he's saying when he said he was an anti-Semite. Oh, shit. The guy went fascist, which he collaborated with during World War II against Britain. Oh, God. Requesting during a meeting with Adolf Hitler backing for Arab independence in opposition to the establishment of a Jewish national home in Palestine. Wow. So this is from the book Holocaust Abuse, the Case of Hajj Muhammad Amin al-Husseini. Michael Sells. I don't know. Wow. So this guy. So he was like, I don't know. I can't blame him for being against the British because he was in Palestine during the 1920s and 30s, and the British were just fucking up Palestine all kinds of much. They were ruling over this land like fucking tyrants. And I don't know about you, but I seem to hear about a real freedom-loving country that one time said it was a really good idea to fight the fucking British and kill them so that they fuck off out of your country and they're not part of it anymore and they don't get to be leading it and they don't get to appoint people and shit. But maybe that's a 1700s kind of thing. All right, so he went to Lebanon, then went to Iraq, then he went to Italy, then he went to Germany. By the way, are they flying all these places? How do you fucking get to all these places? Were they taking commercial airplanes? Ships? I don't know. So he's hanging out with Hitler and asking Hitler to free Palestine. Great, man. With friends like these, who needs enemies? Upon the end of the war, he came under French protection. Why was the French protecting him? Then sought refuge in Cairo. So, from 1937 to 1945, 1946, he's not living in Palestine at all. So for like 10 years or something. In the lead up to the 1948 Palestinian War, Hussein opposed both the 1947 UN partition plan and Jordan's plan to annex the West Bank, failing to gain command of the Arab League's Arab Liberation Army. Hussein built his own militia, the Holy War Army. He failed to gain command of the Arab League's Arab Liberation Army. It's like you have an army and this guy just runs up and he's like, "Can I be the leader?" No. Who are you? I'm the Grand Mufti of all Palestine. That's what the British said I was anyway. Why was he under French protection? And then he was under Egyptian protection. In September 1948, he participated in the establishment of an all-Palestine government in Egyptian-ruled Gaza. Was the Gaza Strip ruled by Egypt? Egypt's all-Palestine Protectorate, 48 to 59. All-Palestine Protectorate was an entity established by the Arab League on 22 September during the 48 Arab-Israeli War, purportedly to provide Palestinian governance for Palestine. After the war, the Gaza Strip was the only former mandate territory under the jurisdiction of the All-Palestine government. So the All-Palestine government was just like people in Egypt, like remotely ruling Palestine. The members of the government were consequently removed to Cairo and had little or no influence over events in the Gaza Strip. On 24 February 1949, the Israel-Egypt Armistice Agreement was signed in Rhodes. Under the agreement, armistice line was drawn along the international border, except near the Mediterranean Sea, where the Kingdom of Israel remained in control of a strip of land along the coast, which became known as the Gaza Strip. It's not complicated. There's just a lot to untangle. All right? This guy was a complicated dude. He did not seem like the nicest guy. He seemed like probably a pretty selfish guy, but also, I don't know. The whole collaborating with fascist Italy and Nazi Germany is bad. The whole being an ally of the British is bad. The whole being protected by the French is bad. But having meetings with Adolf Hitler, ooh, that's bad. Okay. He participated in the establishment of the All-Palestine government in Egyptian-ruled Gaza, which apparently they were all stationed in Cairo and couldn't really do anything. This government won limited recognition and was eventually dissolved by Egypt in 1959. After the war and the 1948 Nakba, his claims to leadership were discredited, and he was eventually sidelined by the establishment of the Palestinian Liberation Organization in 1964. He died in Beirut. Okay. He aligned himself. So what did he do? He he fought in the Ottomans. He served in the Ottoman army during World War One. The Ottoman army, founded in 1299, dissolved in 9922. Wouldn't that be good? No, it was 1922. Medical communications, telephones. Amazing. So I don't know what the Ottomans were doing in World War One, but it seemed like they were done being that. He stationed himself in Damascus. All right, that's in Syria, as a supporter of the Arab Kingdom of Syria. So he's just a former military guy and a guy living in Syria, being a supporter of Syria. After its disestablishment, he moved back to Jerusalem, which is in Palestine, shifting his pan-Arabism, a pan-nationalist ideology that espouses unification of all Arab people in a single nation state. He shifted from that to Palestinian nationalism. Palestinian nationalism originally formed in the early 20th century in opposition to Zionism. Thus rejected the occupation of the Palestinian territories by the government of Israel since the 1967 Six-Day War. They want a right of return. Right of return. All right. So he was just a guy who was a former military guy. He had an ideology of Palestinian nationalism. He actively opposed Zionism, so he became a bit of an activist. And then in 1920, there were some riots, and he was a leader of these riots. So this is, I guess, his first step into leadership. Was the leader of I don't know, riot. This looks like, if you call it a leader, why are you calling it a riot? Riots don't have leaders. This sounds like a demonstration. A violent demonstration, but still. 5 Jews were killed and 700 injured. Several hundred injured. 4 Arabs were killed and 18 injured. 7 Britons were injured. The riots coincided with and are named after the Nebi Musa festival. Crazy shit. We're off track. We're getting way off track. Way off track. We're supposed to be listening to this debate. So we're still on minute 25 of hour 2. I read it and I read it. You'll barely find a word about the Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism. It exists, though. I didn't say it didn't exist. Oh, so you agree it exists? Like, just grasping for anything. Poor Benny. You gotta almost feel sorry for the little black-hearted jackass sometimes, because he's got nothing. He's got nothing.
And also drove him in the end to work in Berlin for Hitler for 4 years, with giving Nazi propaganda to the Arab world, calling on the Arabs to murder the Jews. That's what he did in World War II. That's the leader of the Palestinian Arab national movement.
Why is it?
And he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. He wasn't.
He was the leader of the Palestinian national movement, kind of, but he didn't end up having any, like, he wasn't officially part of any of the biggest main Palestinian authorities, right? He was one of these guys that was, and yeah, he established himself as a leader in these quote unquote riots. But I think Benny Morris in this paragraph here, he's trying to inflate the significance of Husseini, who absolutely, apparently, according to Google or Wikipedia, collaborated with fucking Hitler. Not a great guy, but Norm is saying that in his books, you yourself, Betty, minimized it. You didn't really give a lot of, you didn't say that this was like a major thing, right? You even stated there was a lot of anti-Semitism in those movements, but then you went on to say, but of course, at the bottom, it was all about the occupation. Benny Morris.
Why is it that if you read your book, Righteous Victims, you can read it and read it and read it and read it, as I have, you will find barely a word about the Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism.
It exists, though.
Even I didn't say it doesn't exist.
You agree that it exists.
Hey, I don't know a single non-Jew who doesn't harbor anti-Semitic
We're
sentiment.
talking about Arabs now.
Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's just part of the human condition. Just
Anti-Semitism.
Yes,
Husseini was an ordinary
And among the Arabs.
So
Stephen pipes in. Stephen pipes in with, Husseini was an ordinary anti-Semite? I don't think he was an ordinary anti-Semite. He was a very complicated man. He himself was a Semite. It'd be better to say anti-Jewish. Definitely anti-Zionist. I could be persuaded that Husseini was indeed anti-Jewish. He collaborated with fucking Hitler, or at least he sat and met with him and asked Hitler, "Oh, please, can you help us? Can you help us get free Palestine? Because you'll hate well, and you'll hate the Jews too." Like, that's not a good. I don't know. It sounds from my cursory reading, and we're gonna get into it more. We'll probably do it in a future stream. We'll maybe dig a little deeper into the life of Husseini. But I don't think. First of all, Norm never said Husseini is an ordinary anti-Semite. Norm is saying literally everybody has some anti-Semitism in them. Everyone's got a little in them. And then he goes, but we're talking about Arabs. And I'm like, yeah, but anybody. That's part of the human condition. Anti-Semitism? Yes. And then Stephen goes, Husseini was an ordinary anti-Semite? Like, you are the dumbest fucking dipshit I mean, like if I went, let's say I went dipping for shit, and I took a big dip, pulled out a big shit. Well, that's you, Bonell. The biggest of all the dips and the biggest of all the shits. That's you. And by you, I mean fucking Pestiny ass Bonell. Mr. Borelli. Mr. Borelli, you are a fucking idiot. Let's roll. I'm gonna roll that back one more time. Just watch his stupid little face while he says this bullshit. It's not even a, like, that's not what he's saying. He's saying prejudice, anti-Semitism is part of the human condition. Having irrational hatred for groups of people that you don't know about and are fearful of, that's part of the human condition. Are you saying Husseini was an ordinary anti-Semite? Thankfully, I think Finkelstein doesn't even hear him, or he just ignores it because it's absolutely stupid. That's a great thing to ignore because it's one of those, like, don't put fucking words in my mouth. I never fucking said that. Why would you ask me? Why would you state that with a question mark sound at the end as if that's something I said? Fuck yourself, you piece of shit. Fuck Destiny all day, all day.
Anti-Semitism.
Yes,
Husseini was an ordinary
and among the Arabs.
So, Professor Morris, here's my problem.
And it looks down right after that because he should be absolutely mortified that was his, like, little comeback. And he should be thankful that Norm did him the courtesy of ignoring his stupid ass.
Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's just part of the human condition.
Anti-Semitism.
Yes,
Husseini was an ordinary
and among the Arabs.
So, Professor Morris, here's my problem. I didn't see that in your righteous victims. Even when you talked about the first Intifada, and you talked about the second Intifada, and you talked about how there was a lot of influence by Hamas, the Islamic movement. You even stated that there was a lot of anti-Semitism in those movements. But then you went on to say, but of course, at bottom, it was about the occupation. It wasn't about, and I've read it.
Yeah, but you're moving from different,
I'm not moving.
ages, across
I'm
the ages.
about your whole book.
The occupation began in 67, the one you're talking about.
Bottom, it was about the occupation. It wasn't about, and I've read it.
Yeah, but you're moving from different,
I'm not moving.
ages, across
I'm
the ages.
about your whole book.
The occupation began in 67, the one you're talking about.
I looked and looked and looked for evidence of this anti-Semitism as being a chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I didn't see it.
Did he make that claim?
I don't remember the word chief.
Yeah,
it's one of the elements.
Very binary.
It's one of the elements.
Binary.
Yes, binary.
Did he make that claim? I don't remember that word, chief. So again, Benny will revert to, I never used that exact word, right? Remember, I said it was inevitable and inbuilt. I said it was inbuilt and inevitable. Inevitable. Inevitable and inbuilt into Zionism. He said, those are your words. Didn't he say that? You made that. What did he say? I never said. I didn't say. was it? Inbuilt. Oh, here it was. Deeply entrenched. Norm asks him, either it was incidental or it was deeply entrenched. Here I read it's deeply entrenched. Two very resonant words, inevitable and inbuilt. Deeply entrenched, I never wrote it. It's something you just invented. Right? Yeah, if you were actually paying attention and in good faith, you would know that Norm Finkelstein did not say that you used the words deeply entrenched. He said, here, I read it's deeply entrenched because of the two words you did use, which is inevitable and inbuilt. Those were the words you used. So what's your retort? I never said deeply entrenched. Right? I read in your work that this that your mother is very precious to you. You described her as your great love and your cherished mother. I never said she was precious. I said she was loved and cherished. I never said anything about precious. Right. I didn't quote you as saying precious. I said I understand that you find your mother precious based on the words you did write. Those words were beloved and cherished. You used the words beloved and cherished when describing your mother. And I read that as you, having great affection for your mother. I never said affection. No, I know you didn't say that. I'm saying the words you did say, to me, paint this picture. It evokes another word, what you may say, a paraphrasing. I'm putting your words into my brain as thoughts and redelivering them out with my own words. It's called paraphrasing someone. So Benny is being incredibly disingenuous, bad faith, not at all trying to actually have a truthful, honest conversation. Obviously, Benny is there for one reason. It's to do Hasbara. It's to run cover for Israel. It's to make excuse and to tangle the wires of truth and make anyone who watches this debate feel like, oh, golly, I don't even know what to think now. And it sounds really bad, but I don't want to be anti-Semitic. And they had a smart professor guy on the other side, and he was constantly having to correct himself and say things that the other side was saying he said, and he never said that. Sounded like they were being unfair. They were taking clips from his book, but they were taking them out of context, and he never had a chance to correct it, even though he had absolutely all the chances he had to correct it. Motherfucker, if he wanted to, he could have opened his own goddamn book and said, well, look at this thing that happened 2 pages earlier. And that is the context of that, right? He absolutely could have done that. That's what he should have done. It was a completely fair attack in a debate. If your opponent has written and published a work with evidence for your own side, it's absolutely correct to use that. And it's absolutely correct for that person to be like, okay, you cited this from this page. Well, let's just take 1 page back look and read the whole thing now, and then demonstrate to the audience how that initial pulled quote now takes on a completely new interpretation, a new meaning, a new color based upon the context in which it sits. That would be something Benny Morris could have done. Instead, he's just going to babble and say something like, but you didn't read before that. But it was because of the war. I never wrote deeply entrenched. You just invented that. Right? And then another thing you can do is you can look to the fucking moderator to scoop you up into his arms and literally like shush the other side and say, you're not allowed to reference Benny's book and pull quotes from his book anymore. You're only allowed to ask him, and whatever he tells you, that's what is true. Like, Benny is the author of the book. Benny is not the book. Benny wrote the book 40 fucking years ago. Right? And as we stand today, as the author of that work, he can do, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, he should either defend his work, stand by it, or if something in his work is something that he doesn't believe today, tell us why. Show us examples and tell us why you believed it then and you don't believe it now. Those are all totally fair. But to just sit there and ignore it and talk around it and like pretend, like, I think at one point he makes some disparaging joke of like, you shouldn't be reading my book so much. You should read other things. Right? Just kind of trying to dismiss and downplay and ridicule Norm for being so obsessive. Like, he's such a voracious reader, this crazy guy, and he's only reading my work. And he just tells him right there, he's like, no, I don't just read your stuff. And by the way, I don't find it to be a waste of time to read your stuff. Which has got to be a really weird kind of compliment. Because you know that when Norm is reading, if Norm is reading your book, you'd probably feel a little more nervous than like pleased, right? Norm reads everything. He reads a lot of bullshit that he disagrees with because he has to read it and understand it. So it's like, oh no, Norm's reading my book. Oh, he read it 3 times? Oh my God. That can't be good. That can't be good. Well, fuck. Well, I gotta, you either gotta get ready, man. You gotta be able to denounce and argue about what you wrote in your own book. And if the old man sitting before us today misremembers something that he wrote himself in his own book from 40 years ago, which, knowing how the human brain works, I'd have to imagine that's absolutely true, is that you don't fucking remember what the fuck you wrote. So having like a reference, having your own book up here, or just being like, hey, can I see that? Can I see the copy that you brought with you? And flip through it and show us something. Talk about it. He's so fucking evasive about his own work, his own books. Like I think at one point he kind of confirms like the name of his book, but other times he's just kind of like, yeah, it was something. I don't want to talk about my books. I don't want to talk about my books. I'm here. But Lex fucking Friedman with his like, we don't need to go to the quotes. We can ask the man. He's right here. And then he turns to Rabbani and asks the most convoluted, long-ass question. But essentially, asking Rabbani asking Benny Morris to basically just state the conclusion of what they've been debating about for the past hour. They're like, just tell us the significance of Zionism today. And the philosophy and the influence. Yeah, here it is. We don't need to go to the quotes. We can legitimately ask, how central is the... Yeah. It's a wild fucking long question. So anyway, Benny Morris comes back and does it fucking again, right? When he's cornered. He's in a corner and he's getting slapped back and forth by Norm. He's getting slapped back and forth. Front of the hand, back of the hand, front of the hand, back of the hand. So Benny's like, no, you're moving up from different ages, across the ages. The occupation began in 1967, the one you're talking about. You're moving from different ages. Okay. The occupation began in 1967, the one you're talking about. Even when you talked about the first Intifada, and you talked about the second Intifada, you talked about how there was a lot of influence by Hamas, the Islamic movement, even stated that there was a lot of anti-Semitism. The first Intifada was 87 to 93. The second Intifada was in 2000, 2005. You talked about how there was a lot of influence by Hamas, the Islamic movement. You even stated that there was a lot of anti-Semitism in those movements. But then you went on to say, but of course, at the bottom, it was about the occupation. Correct. Okay. That occupation began in 1967. So that first Intifada that happened in the 80s, late 80s, would have been the underlying motivator for these Intifadas, right? And he says, no, but you're moving from different ages. I'm talking about your whole book. The whole book. So this is one of his examples, right? I mean, again, he's slapping him back and forth with a lot of these things, right? So in the book Righteous Victims, you read it as I have. You barely find a word about Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism, right? As I said, when the war was done, okay. You're minimizing the anti-Semitic. Okay, this all starts with this. You're minimizing the anti-Semitic element. You minimized it. In Arab nationalism, in all your books, you minimized it. So he goes to his example is Righteous Victims. Read the whole thing. There's barely a word about anti-Semitism. It exists, though. I didn't say it didn't exist. Oh, so you agree it exists? Blink, blink, blink. That's reach number 1. Hey, I don't know a single non-Jew who doesn't harbor anti-Semitic sentiments. We're talking about Arabs now. Okay, that's reach number 2. Yeah, buddy. He said a single non-Jew. That would include the Arabs. I guess not the Jewish Arabs. Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's just part of the human condition. Anti-Semitism? Yes. Stephen, Husseini was an ordinary anti-Semite? Said nobody. And among the Arabs, I think that's Benny Morris saying that. So, Professor Morris, here's my problem. I didn't see that in your Righteous Victims. So, when he says, I didn't see that, maybe he's talking about this whole thing when he's saying Husseini was an anti-Semite. Husseini was an anti-Semite. This was one of the things which drove him and also drove him in the end to work in Berlin for Hitler for 4 years, giving Nazi propaganda to the Arab world, calling on the Arabs to murder the Jews. That's what he did in World War II. That's the leader of the Palestine Arab National Movement. And he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone. Why is it if I read your book, Righteous Victims, all the way through the book, there's barely a word about anti-Semitism? It exists. Yeah, but why is there barely any? Ah, so you agree it exists. And he's like, does a bear shit in the woods? He says, yeah. There's not a single soul on this earth who isn't a Jew who's not at least a teeny little bit anti-Semitic. But we're talking about Arabs. Yeah. Again, if you say anyone, you're including Arabs in that. Maybe it's he didn't specifically narrow them down. But whatever. The point, it's still the point. So again, Benny doesn't have anything to say. He's reaching. It exists though. Didn't answer the question. Why is it that there is barely a word about it? Why? Why is there barely a word? We agree it exists. If there's barely something, then there must be some of that. It must exist. If I say, hey, there's barely any hot sauce in this burrito, they'll say, but it exists. Right? Excuse me. Why is this burrito called the full of beans burrito when there's like one bean in here? There's a bean in there. Though I didn't say there wasn't a bean in there. Oh, so you agree there's a bean in there. Say, hey, I don't know a single burrito that ain't got at least one bean in it. But we're talking about this burrito. Yeah. But I'm just saying, I don't know any burritos. It's just part of the burrito condition. And then like some employee walks from behind the back room and comes out and just chimes in. And he's like, tacos? Tacos go on houses? And then everyone ignores him. Maybe we should try to do this. We should turn the whole debate into like someone, like we just change the substance of the debate, but keep the skeleton of it. Keep the same arguments happening. But just have it all go down in like a burrito shop. But we're talking about Arabs now. Okay. So Benny has nothing to say. He's floundering. He's reaching. Because it's like, okay, you wrote a whole book about this shit. Why is there barely a word about anti-Semitism by Arabs? I read the whole book multiple times. You have nothing to say about it. You can't answer that. You can't answer why. You just say it exists. And then you go, ha ha, you agree that it exists. Ha ha. No answer to the question. He says basically, hey, literally everyone's anti-Semitic sometimes. A little bit. And he says, but we're talking about Arabs. Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's part of the human condition. Anti-Semitism is part of the human condition? Did you just say that? Yes, I said that. Yes, says Norman Finkelstein. He's saying he was an ordinary anti-Semite? Says fucking Pestiny. Shut your stupid goddamn mouth up. What a fucking dipshit. Never once has added anything of value to this entire conversation. Not once. He's just a little motor mouth on repeat with the same 3 talking points, just trying to cram them in whenever he can. And then when he's not doing that, he's just going to put the weirdest, fucking most nonsensical words into your mouth. Or he's going to try at least. So then, Finkelstein says, here's my problem. I didn't see that in Righteous Victims. I didn't see that. I didn't see Arabs motivated by anti-Semitism. He says, even when you talked about the first Intifada, and you talked about the second Intifada. Now, I have to look those up to know when those were. But I am confident that both Norm knows when these Intifadas happened, the first and the second. I also believe that Benny Morris knows when these happened. And I believe that Norm believes and knows that Benny knows. And Benny knows that Norm knows. That everybody in that room, of the people in that room, Norm, Benny, and Moeen all know exactly what they're saying in this. Like, they all know what's his name? I can't talk. They all know what Norm is saying. When Norm says, even when you talked about the first Intifada, and you talked about the second Intifada, and you talked about how there was a lot of influence by Hamas, the Islamic movement, you even stated that there was a lot of anti-Semitism in those movements. But then you went on to say, but of course, at bottom, it was about the occupation. Okay? So, yeah, he's taking examples from this book, and he says, in the part of the book where you do talk, where you state that there was a lot of anti-Semitism, even in that part of the book, even in that part of the book, you said at the bottom that it was about the occupation, right? In order for it to be about the occupation, that occupation would have to have been happening before the first Intifada, right? Otherwise, it wouldn't make sense. They did the Intifada because of the occupation. Wouldn't make sense if there wasn't an occupation before it, right? Benny Morris says, no, but you're moving from different ages, all across the ages. The occupation began in 1967. The one you're talking about. Okay. That in no way, that's just plainly like perfectly logical. That in no way contradicts anything that he said here. At the bottom, it was because it was about the occupation that had started in 1967. How would that have changed his answer? How would that have affected this argument at all? Could it? Would it? That the occupation began in 1967? He's moving from different ages. He's talking about different things that happen at different times. He's making the point that Benny Morris, in his own books, minimized the anti-Semitic element. That he minimized the anti-Semitic element of Arab nationalism. Now, another problem I have with that is Arab people are also Semitic. They speak Arabic. So, Husseini was an anti-Semite. Okay, he was anti-Jewish. I would say he was anti-Jewish. I don't know if I would say he was an anti-Semite. But whatever. Let's say he was. In your own books, you minimized how important he was in the motivation for all these uprisings and intifadas and things like that. In fact, the first one, you're moving across time. And Norm doesn't give a fuck about that, because when he says you're moving across the ages, Norm says, no, I'm not moving. I'm talking about your whole book. Your whole book. I looked and looked and looked for evidence of anti-Semitism being a chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I didn't see it. Did he make that claim? I don't remember the word chief. I don't remember the word chief. Did he argue that? I don't remember the word chief. So again, Norm is paraphrasing. So anytime, if you paraphrase someone's argument, one of the things they can do is go, did I fucking say that? Did I fucking say that? I don't remember. I don't think I ever used the word and then quote exactly the word they use. Did I fucking say that? Well, we can find out if you fucking said that, Professor Morris. This is all about how you're minimizing anti-Semitic element. You said that Norm is minimizing it, the anti-Semitic element, by what did Norm do to minimize it? There are perfectly obvious reasons having nothing to do with anti-Semitism, anti-Westernism, anti-Europeanism, but because no people that I'm aware of would voluntarily cede its own country. You can perfectly understand Native American resistance into Euro-colonialism. You can perfectly well understand it without any anti-Europeanism, anti-whiteism, anti-Christianism. They don't want to cede their country to invaders. That's completely understandable. You're minimizing the anti-Semitic element. You minimized it. Okay. What he had written, according to Norm, was the chief motor. You wrote that territorial displacement and dispossession was the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I looked and looked and looked for evidence of anti-Semitism as being the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism, and I didn't see it. Did he make that claim? Now, Destiny is being an idiot because it's not, Finkelstein isn't saying that claim would be in the book. He said he looked and looked and looked for evidence of that, but didn't see it. right? And he's making a direct reference to the idea of the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. Before, he had said, was the occupation or the displacement and expulsion, right? Transfer. That was the chief motor, as in the number one reason that Arabs resisted Zionism, right? So he quoted him earlier as saying the chief motor, right? So he said this was in his opening, no, not his opening statement, in his second time through. Page 37 of the book, Righteous Victims, he wrote that territorial displacement and dispossession was the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. Territorial displacement and dispossession were the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. He repeats it twice. Benny Morris had no problem saying anything. He didn't say, like, I never said chief. I don't remember saying chief. I don't remember saying chief. He just says, I think you made your point there. I think you made your point there. First, I'll talk to Moeen. And then he turns back and he says, he turns back to Norm, and they go on. And they argue about some things. But he never disputes that on page 37 of his book, he says that the chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism was displacement and dispossession. Okay, we cut to an hour and 27 minutes. He says, I looked and looked and looked for evidence of this anti-Semitism as being a chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I didn't see it. Did he make that claim? This is one of those little tricks that the sophists will do to pull you off of your line of attack. Which is to just misunderstand, purposely, probably, or because they're just like, I'm going to interpret that in the easiest way for me to counter it, which is, let's pretend that whatever you said is something that supposedly I said, but I never said that. So, or he, did he make that claim? So, like, if someone says, I looked and looked around for this, and I never saw it. Did I ever make that claim? First of all, what do you mean that claim? Did he claim the claim that this would be in the book? Or the claim that anti-Semitism is the chief motor of Arab resistance? Either way, Norm didn't say that. Norm is not accusing Benny of having claimed that he wrote that it was in the book, or that he's today claiming it to be a chief motor. He's saying, in your book, you already said what the chief motor of Arab resistance was. You already said it. You already told us it was displacement. And here now you're trying to say, no, a lot of it had to do with anti-Semitism. That was actually very key to everything. It's, okay, well, I didn't read about that being the chief motor of Arab resistance. That's not what I read as the chief motor. And he's saying, like, why doesn't your book have way more? This book should have way more examples. If you sell me a bean burrito and there's like 2 beans in it, back to the burritos. I'm telling you. Imagine, bean burrito. Chock full of beans, it says. You pay your money, you open the foil, you open it up. It's 97% rice, and like 3 beans. Just a big fucking flour tortilla full of rice with 3 beans. And you're like, this is the bean burrito? This is the bean burrito? Are you kidding me? Where's the beans, Benny? And Benny says, did I ever say there were beans? I don't remember saying chock full. But there is beans. You said, oh, so now you admit there were beans. Oh, I thought there were no beans. Now you say there's beans. I guess you're an idiot. You're moving to different ages. No, I'm not. I'm talking about your whole book. I'm talking about what's not in the book. This thing that today you're arguing is more important than what you thought was able to publish and be peer reviewed. I don't remember the word chief. You don't remember the word chief? I don't remember the word chief. All right. Sounds like a you problem, Benny. Answer the fucking question. I don't remember the word chief. It doesn't matter if you remember the word chief. You know what the fuck he's saying. You know what the fuck he's saying. He's saying show us the evidence that anti-Semitism was more of an issue, was more part of the what's it called? The motivation for Arab resistance. Right. Now, Stephen says, you have a very binary thinking when it comes to that. Binary? Yes, binary. So, Norm's only response to this is postmodernism. And I believe when Norm uses the word postmodernism, that he probably uses it to mean something closer to its like actual meaning. In terms of, but I could be wrong. He might just be saying like, that sounds nonsensical to me because of the way he talks with like, he's often very word salady. That it might be just one of those things that older boomer aged people say when they hear nonsense. They call it postmodern. But he's also very intellectual and stuff. And so I don't even know what he means by postmodern necessarily. But using the word binary, because to me, postmodernism, I feel like, would have a tendency to reject things like a binary. Or at least ask why something has to be a binary. Why it can't be something in between. Or something above or outside of the binary choices. Raising questions rather than supplying answers. In philosophy, post-structuralism, a disparate group of French theorists, often grouped together as pseudo-structuralists, developed a critique of modern philosophy with roots discernible in Friedrich Nietzsche and Martin Heidegger's critique of metaphysics. Oh, how fascinating. Post-structuralists like structuralists, start from the assumption that people's identities, values, and economic conditions determine each other as part of a common whole, rather than having intrinsic properties that can be understood in isolation. While structuralism explores how meaning is produced by a set of essential relationships in an overarching quasi-linguistic system, post-structuralism accepts this premise but rejects the assumption that such systems can ever be fixed or centered. Eh? Eh? This is sliding right off of my smooth brain and into the toilets. I don't know. Now, here's the thing I can tell you though, is that it's not binary thinking what Norm is doing. Why would they even think to say binary thinking? You could maybe perceive him as saying, hey, it was either occupation or it was anti-Semitism. It had to be one or the other. Which was it? I don't think Norm is saying that at all. Norm is pointing out that anti-Semitism doesn't come up much in your book. And you're overinflating it right now in this debate. But according to your book, the chief motor of Arab resistance is fucking was the threat of expulsion off the land was the chief motor. So, like, I didn't see anti-Semitism in that part. I didn't see anything about that being the chief motor. You have a very binary thinking when it comes to the binary? Yes, binary. Don't give me this postmodernism binary. You're the one. No, but you are thinking in terms of black and white. You're the one that said the chief motor. Stephen has a point. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. Is that Benny Morris? Yeah, it has to be. Do you have your book here? You talk about black and page 137. You talk in black and white. Yeah, here's some black and white. It's called text. Go to 137. Page 37. Okay, so this has to be Benny. You talk about you're talking black and white. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one of the others. And you don't seem to see that. You don't seem to see that. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for saying that thing about binary. That gave me an idea. I'm just gonna accuse him of like not knowing how to think. Hey, Norm Finkelstein, I don't know if you know this, but there's this little thing called nuance. Try it sometime. You may want to hear about it. You may want to try it. It's called gray areas. Buddy, I don't know if you ever heard of that concept. Sorry if I'm blowing your mind, Norman Finkelstein, but you ever hear this whole thing called like a spectrum? Not everything is fucking digital zeros and ones, Finkelstein. You're over here trying to say like it's this or that, and I'm telling you, man, it's something in between, dude. Open your fucking mind, Norman Finkelstein. You don't understand, man. The world's not all black and white, dude. What a fucking stoner ass kind of fucking comment is that? And then who says, can I ask you a quick, because it's for them to talk to, just a very quick question. I'm okay. I don't know, because again, we need to color code this as we go so we know who's talking when we read the transcripts. Because I don't want to just type everyone's name over and over and over. I like to color code it. I like the color coding. It keeps me honest. It keeps it interesting, and it just makes it easier to see like how long someone was talking for versus how long other people were talking for. And, yeah, it's a good thing. You know, I didn't spend a lot of time this stream talking about why I'm streaming, which is probably good. I probably shouldn't waste that much time with that. Anyway, this whole stream has turned out to be really just about the 24 to 26 minute mark. 124 to 126. It's even more like 125. What was 124? Yeah, except for the land, he's doing it Tuesday. Really got cooking at like 125 when he says, you're minimizing the anti-Semitic element. Right? So, yeah, this is right at 125. So this whole stream has been really about these 2 minutes. Kind of a big 2 minutes. A lot happens. Let's go back and review the full 2 minutes that we watched. So we're at 25, and let's just try to get the big picture again of this whole anti-Semitism being one big element that motivated Arab resistance, right? So, because Benny Morris is trying to say, like, Arabs fighting back was done for bad reasons. They did it because they're bad guys. It was motivated by hate. It was a crime of passion, right? It was premeditated Arabs going, you know what I hate? I fucking hate Jews so much. That's why we should start a military fucking group and we should attack them. Because we hate them. Is it because they are threatening to steal your land? I mean, whatever, like, steal our land or whatever. Like, that's not the part that bothers me. I think whether or not they come and steal my land here, either way, I want to go to wherever they are, and I want to kill them. All right. That's Benny Morris's general argument. He's trying to say there's an anti-Semitic element behind, and obviously, because like, it would have to be chief among the reasons, right? In order to excuse it, in order for you to get us modern day people to agree that when we're casting our judgments at history, that we would say all of these Arab uprisings were completely unjust and unfounded. Like, they had no reason to do that. They attacked just because they were Jewish. And there's no other reason. Just because they're Jewish and had all their water hostage. These people, they started hitting me. They were hitting me really hard on my head. But it was just because of my religion. And so I hid inside their closet because they were hitting me. And they kept telling me to get out of the house. But I tried to tell them it's my house now. And they didn't believe me, and they said it was still their house. And they kept hitting me. All right, let's watch. This is 25 minute, 1 hour 25, and we'll probably. Ooh, kitty cats going off. All right, let's give it a watch.
Understandable.
You're minimizing the anti-Semitic element
You
in
minimized
in
it.
Arab
In
nationalism.
all your books, you minimized.
No. Husseini was an anti-Semite. The leader of the Palestinian national movement in the 30s and 40s was an anti-Semite. This was one of the things which drove him, and also drove him in the end to work in Berlin for Hitler for 4 years, with giving Nazi propaganda to the Arab world, calling on the Arabs to murder the Jews. That's what he did in World War II. That's the leader of the Palestinian Arab national movement.
Why is it?
And he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone.
Professor
He
Morris,
wasn't.
why is it that if you read your book, Righteous Victims, you can read it and read it and read it and read it, as I have, you will find barely a word about the Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism.
It exists, though.
Even I didn't say it doesn't exist.
You agree that it exists.
Hey, I don't know a single non-Jew who doesn't harbor anti-Semitic
We're talking about
sentiments.
Arabs now.
Yeah, but I don't know anybody. That's just part of the human condition. Just
Anti-Semitism.
Yes, I do,
Husseini
I
was
do.
an
I-
ordinary
And among the
anti-Semite.
Arabs.
So, Professor Morris, here's my problem. I didn't see that in your Righteous Victims. Even when you talked about the first Intifada, and you talked about the second Intifada, and you talked about how there was a lot of influence by Hamas, the Islamic movement. You even stated that there was a lot of anti-Semitism in those movements. But then you went on to say, but of course, at bottom, it was about the occupation. It wasn't about, and I've read it.
Yeah, but you're moving from different,
No,
different
I'm not moving.
ages, across
I'm
the ages.
talking about your whole book.
The
Your
occupation
whole book.
began in
I
67, the one
I
you're
looked,
talking about.
I looked and looked and looked.
You hear how Benny kind of nervous, laughing? You're moving across the different ages. Across the occupation began in 67. The one you're talking about. Just grasping. Stephen Bonnell's about to come in and bail him out and tell him that he's very binary thinking. This binary thinking. He's thinking binary.
For evidence of this anti-Semitism as being a chief motor of Arab resistance to Zionism. I didn't see it.
You like the?
Did he make that claim?
I don't remember the word chief.
Yeah.
It's one of the elements.
You're very binary
It's one of
thinking
the
when it comes
elements.
to like,
Binary.
analyzing. Yes, binary.
Please don't give me this postmodernism binary. You're the
No, but
one.
you are thinking in terms
You're
of black
the one
and
that
white.
said
He's
the
got- no,
chief
Stephen has a
motor.
point.
Do you have your book
You
here?
talk about
Page
black
137.
You talk in black and white.
Page 37.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of.
Your book
You
here.
talk.
Please don't give.
One of the elements.
You're very binary
It's one of
thinking
the
when it comes
elements.
to like,
Binary.
analyzing. Yes, binary.
Please don't give me this postmodernism binary. You're the
No, but
one.
you are thinking in terms
You're
of black
the one
and white.
that said
He's
the
got- no,
chief
Stephen has a
motor.
point.
Do you have your book
You
here?
talk about
Page
black and
137.
You talk in black and
Excuse me,
white.
page 37.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots. Talking in black and. You talk about
Page
black. in terms of
You're
black
the
and
one
white.
that said
He's
the
got- no,
chief
Stephen has a
motor.
point.
Do you have your book
You
here?
talk about
Page
black and-
137.
You talk in black
Excuse
and
me,
white.
page 37.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't.
That you can see the facial expression both of these guys are making at this point. When he says lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. Both of these guys just like, okay. That, I don't know. That looks good. So, you're talking in black and white. Floundering. Flippity floppity, floundering around, doesn't fucking know. talking black. You're talking black. No, you're just completely ignoring the point made. If you want to say which was a larger contributor to Arab resistance, anti-Semitism, or the occupation of their land by a hostile army, it's your stage, man. You're free to fucking argue. Make your case. State your case, dude. Who's the one who says, "Can I ask you a quick?" Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. That's just by reading the text. That sounds like a Destiny kind of question.
And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them
Yeah, I knew it. Can I ask a quick?
to talk to. Just a very quick
Yes.
question. What was
Okay, what's your question, Steven? I hope it's not. How can you ignore the fact that the Arabs rejected the partition resolution? Here's the question. What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? What would they have preferred? What would they have preferred, and what would have happened? They were explicit. And then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli population or Jewish population? Well, there wouldn't be an Israeli population because there wouldn't be an Israel. He's like, can I ask you a quick, because it's for them to talk to, just a very quick question. You ask a question, I believe someone starts to answer it. This is a good question. What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? I'm going to give him that. This is a perfectly cromulent question. I would like to actually hear. I would genuinely be curious to hear what both of them say as their answer to this. Right after that, he can't help himself but just continue to just gurgle out fucking words. And what would they have preferred? And what would have happened? And then the second one, like, just shut the fuck up. You asked a good question, and now you have to ruin it by just babbling on and on and on, saying nothing. And then the second question is even more convoluted and not a good question. What would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli population or the Jewish population?
What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? What would they have preferred?
Well,
and what would
they
have
were
happened
explicit.
if, and then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to them?
So you had 4 fucking questions. Can I ask you real quick, because it's for them to shock, just a real quick question. What would have happened? And he starts to answer your question. Your question has an answer to it. Moin Rabbani is ready to tell you your answer. But that's not good sophistry. That's not good debate. As a sophist, you need to make sure your questions are at least several sentences long, contain lots of compound questions, lots of ands and what would have and this, right? Because we don't remember, Stephen's job is to tangle. Benny Morris's job is to tangle everything. They're tanglers. They're introducing things. They're weaving things in and out of other things. And they're trying to make this all as tangled and confusing as possible. So while people in a conversation in good faith could say, What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? See what I'm doing here? I'm just keeping my mouth shut. I asked a question. Now I shut my fucking ass up and I listen to the answer. That's what a good faith conversation would be. Here's what a sophist in bad faith does. What would they have preferred? Or what do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side from 47? What would they have preferred? And what would have happened? And the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli or the Jewish population if that had happened? Huh? What would have happened? What would have happened to them? What would have happened to them? Hey, just spin me an alternate history. What kind of answer, especially this second question, because the ideal solution on the Arab side does have an answer in terms of we could probably know what they were advocating for at the time. What they would have preferred, what would have happened. How can anyone know what would have happened if one side lost a war? Whatever answer they're going to give is just their speculation. Whatever answer you want to give is just your speculation. We're not going to be able to find like a platform that says, if the Jews lose this war, here's what we're going to do to them. Right? But when you go to like before a war and you want to know like what would have been the ideal solution for this side, those are things we have answers for. Those are things we can record and talk about because people put those into words and put them into writing and like negotiate and stuff and talk about them. Very often for a long, long time leading up to the conflict. So that is an answerable question. Big mistake from a sophist, right? This, in fact, was actually probably a really kind of a slip up. And the fact that Moeen Rabbani started answering so quickly, he had to be like, and another question. And then his second question has to be like just a dumb shit. Like, what would have happened? What's your alt history what's your headcanon for the alternate history where Israel loses the 48 war in Palestine? What do you think would have happened to the Jews? What do you think? What do you think would have happened? Is he hoping that Rabbani or Norm are going to say like, well, of course the Arabs would have slaughtered all the Jews to drive them from the land. And that would have been great and based, and we think Hamas is cool, and we think it's cool to kill all the Jews. Like, I mean, he's trying to get his audience to have that perception. But what would have happened if the Jews would have lost the war in 40? It's just such a stupid little kid question. It sounds like a little kid who's like, because there's a little bit of would've. There's a little bit of would've, could've, should've going on, right? When we talk about this stuff. But there are limits to how much what would have happened you can talk about in history. There are limits to that. You can't just, well, I'm just going to throw out a radical different outcome in history, and then I want my opponent to sort of just ponder on that and tell me what would have happened. And what is that going to prove? Other than the only way this would help you in your debate is if your opponents said, if the Jews would have lost the war, the Arabs would have genocided them. Yeah. And then, like, yeah, then you can use that in your debate, and you're like, see, the Arabs are so violent by nature. There's just something rotten about them, rotten to the core. It's a stupid, stupid question. This guy is... he almost had a good question, but he fucked it up by having... You know, he's done longer preambles. This was not one of his longer ones, but it's still a dumb preamble. Can I ask you a quick... Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. Obviously, he's coming in to bail out Benny Morris. Because Benny Morris cannot answer Norm's question. He never did. All he does is flounder and flap and flop. It exists, though. You agree it exists? We're talking about Arabs now. But you're moving from different ages. You're moving across the ages. I didn't say the word chief. You're thinking in black and white. You're black and white. You're talking black and white concept. History is much grayer. And then this is basically Benny throwing in the towel. He's like, but I didn't do. But I didn't. No. He's just throwing in the towel. You can see the way the guys just lean back, like, okay, I guess we're off this topic. He's got nothing to say. And then here's Steven in a tone and pace like he's got to fucking catch a bus. Can I ask you just a very quick question? What do you mean just a very quick question, dude? You're an hour and a half into a 5-hour debate, and you're debating Israel-Palestine, and you're like, just really quick. If you're there in good faith and you're gonna debate Israel-Palestine, and you know it's your turn to talk, why would you just ask a question? Why would you ask not only a question, but the most open-ended question? Like, just invite your opponents to talk. Literally, like, if they talked for any less than, say, 3 full minutes, I would argue that they weren't really answering your questions, because those questions can go on and on and on. Like these are... First, he's like, he asked you 4 things. Okay, we'll call the second one thing. But the first one is definitely like 2 different things. What was the ideal solution on the Arab side? As in, what would the Arabs prefer as their... what did Arabs prefer as their ideal solution? What would they have preferred? What would have happened? That's a separate question. What would have happened? And then, fast forward, what would have happened? Now, again, if you're saying the ideal solution, what was the ideal solution? You're saying if the ideal solution happened, then what would have happened after that? Because maybe there wouldn't have been a war in 48. You ever think of that, dipshit? Or are these 2 completely separate questions? So, wait, the first hypothetical is the ideal solution was reached in 47. Second hypothetical question, Arab solution wasn't reached in 47, but Jews lost the war in 48. Then what would have happened? Then what would have happened? Whatever. After these 2 questions, you're essentially just throwing it to your opponent to go on and on and on and pontificate. And state their own case. And because they're going to pivot to their talking point, because remember, we're in a debate and we're trying to make points, trying to be persuasive and say the things that build our case. So Rabbani's going to keep building his case. He's going to answer your question, and then I don't know. We'll see what it does. It's getting a little more interesting now, though. I have to admit, this is a little more interesting. It's getting very interesting now. Because Destiny, like always, comes up with a really dumb question that's dumb in so many ways. It's dumb in the way that it's not actually working for his trying to be persuasive. It is kind of not working in trying to be disruptive and be kind of a red herring or tangle, because what you did is you asked one good question, and then you babbled for a little while, and nobody's going to understand what you said during your fucking babbling. That Rabbani's going to answer your question factually, and then you're going to be on the defense. I hate the whole, like, let me make my argument. Asks a question to the opponent. Like, make your point. Don't ask your opponent to just answer a question first. You should be able to just make your point. And if you have a rhetorical question, you have to answer it yourself. This is the kind of shit I fucking hate. Right? This, like, every argument he has to put forward is in the form of a question posed to the opponent. And it's fucking stupid.
Israel, and then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war? And what would they have preferred?
Look at him interrupt his own one quick question, which was two questions. He's getting an answer for it. He interrupts the guy answering it to ask a second stupid fucking nonsense question. What a piece of shit.
Grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. What do you think the ideal solution was on the...
What's the fucking hurry, dude? Why? Look at him just fucking flip out. Look at this body language.
Your book
You
here,
talk about
page
black
137.
You talk in black and white.
Page 37.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. What do you...
You don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick...
It's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. On his notes, he like draws a little box. He outlines something on his notes right before he says this. Watch his notes.
You talk in black and white.
Page 37.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things.
He's underlining something. He just underlined something that was at the top left page of his notes.
Happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question.
Just to very quick, I think he said just to very quick question. So maybe he did say there's two, but it sounded more like just a very quick question.
And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question.
Are we to believe that he's reading this? The words that are about to come out of his mouth, is he reading this?
What do you think the ideal solution was on the Arab side?
Again, he could stop there. It's a great question.
From 47.
What? And then you notice as soon as he asks the question, he has to restate it, but he doesn't restate it. He asks a different question.
Would they have preferred?
Well,
and what would
they
have
were
happened if?
explicit.
And then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost?
Okay, so then the what would have happened is his second. This is part of the second question. What would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? Okay, so he asked the second question in the middle of being interrupted, not after he's interrupted. Okay, I'll admit to being wrong on that. I was characterizing it as him interrupting before him asking the second question, but he does ask this. He does start the second question before being interrupted with the answer to his first question. Okay, so he asks two questions. What was the ideal solution for the Arab side? What would they have preferred? Okay, whatever. I would have used a different grammar. I would have said, what did they prefer? /want. I wouldn't say what would they have preferred. Because we're talking about before the war. Like, what were the demands? What were the wants? What were the claims, the positions? Right? But he didn't say that. He said, what would they have preferred, and what would have happened? They were in the second one. What would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli population or Jewish population?
Just a very quick question. What was?
You don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. What was?
He says just two very quick question. Just two very. He forgot to put the S on the end of questions.
And you don't seem to see that.
Can I ask you a question? Because it's for them to talk to. Just a very quick question. What do you think the ideal?
Yeah, just two very quick question. He's like in such a hurry. He's like so rushed all of a sudden. He just suddenly is like, oh, I was to talk to. Why do you have to ask two very quick questions? Why now? Like what? I mean, you could have tried to help make an answer to the thing that Benny couldn't answer for the previous 5 fucking minutes. But no, you're just going to be like, what should have happened? Let's hear the answer.
Solution was on the Arab side from 47. What would they have preferred?
Well,
and what would
they
have
were
happened
explicit.
and then the second one, what would have happened if Jews would have lost the war in 48? What do you think would have happened to the Israeli population or Jewish population?
I think the Palestinians and the Arabs were explicit that they wanted a unitary, I think, federal state, and they made their submissions to UNSCOP. They made their appeals at the UN General Assembly.
What do you mean by unitary and federal? I don't get that. They wanted an Arab state. They wanted Palestine to be an Arab state.
Yes, yes.
Put it simply.
But I
Not
think
the word unitary, federal. They wanted Palestine
Yes, but
as
I
an
think-
Arab and exclusive.
Ooh, we're about to hear Benny Morris make a impassioned argument for how morally wrong it would be to establish an exclusively Arab state. And he's going to say, it's because all these other states are Arabic. There's 29 Arabic states. They all get to be Arab states with no Jews. We just wanted one for Jews. I think that's what he's going to argue.
Exclusively Arab state.
No, it wasn't
That's
an
what they wanted.
no, it wasn't an exclusively Arab state. I think
Arab.
yes,
Put
yes.
it simply.
ratified
but I
Without
think
the word unitary, federal, they wanted Palestine
Yes, but
as
I
an
think-
Arab and exclusively Arab state.
No, it wasn't
That's
an
what they wanted.
no, it wasn't an exclusively Arab state. I think we have to distinguish between Palestinian and Arab opposition to a Jewish state in Palestine on the one hand, and Palestinian and Arab attitudes to Jewish existence in Palestine. And there's a fundamental
Well,
difference.
Husseini, the leader of the movement, said that
An Arab state.
Arab state.
Yes,
Put
yes.
it simply. They wanted an Arab state. They wanted Palestine to be an Arab state.
Yes,
Put
yes.
it simply.
But I
Without
think-
the word unitary, federal, they wanted Palestine
Yes, but
as
I
an
think-
Arab and exclusively Arab state.
No, it wasn't
That's
an
what they wanted.
no, it wasn't an exclusively Arab state. I think we have to distinguish between Palestinian and Arab opposition to a Jewish state in Palestine on the one hand, and Palestinian and Arab attitudes to Jewish existence in Palestine. And there's a fundamental
Well,
difference.
Husseini, the leader of the movement, said that all the Jews who had come since 1917, and that's the majority of the Jews in Palestine in 1947,
Yes.
shouldn't be there.
Well, he
They
did say
shouldn't be citizens and they shouldn't be there.
He did-
PLO
he
charter
did
said
say
that in
that.
64.
Yes, they
I'm
said
not
the
going to
same.
deny
Yes,
it.
the
Of
PLO
course,
also said
it's
that.
true. I
Yes.
can understand the sentiment, but I think it's 60.
Yeah, 17, and that's the majority of said that all.
Existence in Palestine. And there's a fundamental
Well,
difference.
Husseini, the leader of the movement, said that all the Jews who had come since 1917, and that's the majority of the Jews in Palestine in 1947,
Yes.
shouldn't be there.
Well, he
They
did say
shouldn't be citizens and they shouldn't be there.
He did-
PLO
he did
charter
say
said that in
that.
64.
they
I'm
said
not
the
going to
same.
deny
Yes,
it.
the
Of
PLO
course,
also said
it's
that.
true. I
Yes.
can understand the sentiment.
Oh my god. Oh my god. We got some over talking. We got Norm coming in. We've got some over talking, boy. Tell you what, this over talking is going to slow us down. And you know what? I think it might be a sign that we have to slow down. It's been 3 hours, 16 minutes. Pretty good length stream. You know, I did a couple for 4 hours. I've been known to do some 4-hour streams. I've been known to do some hour and 45-minute streams. I'd say the theme of this stream, the stream theme, is pretty much 125 to 127. But so we're getting somewhere because this is kind of finally a new point. Although it's sort of a mirror edge because Zionists imagined Israel to be an exclusively Jewish state that would have a minority of Arabs, but exclusively Jewish people are the only ones who are actual citizens. Right? Everyone else would be foreigners, visitors. And Benny Morris said, no, not exclusivist. You keep using that word exclusive. It's wrong. Right? So Moin Rabbani says, the idea of establishing an exclusively Jewish state at the expense of those who are already living here, I think it was right to reject that. Benny Morris comes back a while later. The word exclusive, which you keep using, is nonsense. He used it one time, but whatever. The state which Ben Gurion envisioned would be a Jewish majority state as they accepted a 1947 partition resolution. That included 400,000 plus Arabs in a state which would have 500,000 Jews. So the idea of exclusivity wasn't anywhere in the air at all among Zionist leaders in 47-48. They wanted a Jewish majority state, but were willing to accept a state which had 40% Arabs. Okay. So that's what they're saying now about the submission to UNSCOP for a federal state. They made their appeals. They wanted an Arab state. They wanted Palestine to be an Arab state. Yes, yes. But I think, no, it wasn't an exclusively Arab state. We have to distinguish between Palestinian and Arab opposition to a Jewish state in Palestine on one hand, and Palestinian and Arab attitudes to Jewish existence in Palestine. So even before all this nonsense, before the Western world got involved in all their shit, there were Jewish and Christian and Muslim people all living together. And in fact, in every country, there was a mix of all of these people. And there still are. And there always were. But, you know, what I'm saying is it wasn't just like the arrival of the refugees from World War II, from the Holocaust, that make up the Jewish population. So anyway, Benny's now on the opposite side, trying to say no. What the Palestinians were advocating for was for a place that they would ban and disallow Jews from living on their land. And he's going to go back to Husseini, right? Now, Husseini was one motherfucker. I think he was, at least, even at his time, was a quite controversial figure. Because it seems to me the dude had his finger in a lot of different pies in a lot of different times. Dude was kicking it with Adolf Hitler and Benito Mussolini, I think. Or at least was, I don't know, he did something in fascist Italy. I don't know. And then was just leaders of all sorts of different groups, and made his own army when he couldn't get support from a different army. So he was an influential guy. He was an influencer. He could build an army. Army, barmy, darmy, warmy. Wouldn't that be crazy? I bet like YouTubers nowadays could totally build armies if they wanted to. If you get enough of a big enough audience, you're gonna have statistically a large number of very loyal, like ride or die fan people, fan NBs and fan girls and boys. And you could, if you wanted to, you could probably get them all to be like an army. Like it could all move to like a base where you like feed and clothe them. You know, you got to work out a schedule too, so they get time off and kind of rotate in and out. But you could do that. You could make your own army. And you could call it whatever you want. You could get a flag. And you can have like secret handshakes and stuff. And you can have like it's just something you could do. And that's what Husseini did. He was basically a YouTuber of his day. So he says Husseini, the leader of the movement, said that all Jews who had come since 1917, and that's the majority of Jews in Palestine in 1947, that's correct, shouldn't be there. Well, he did say they shouldn't be citizens and they shouldn't be there. He did say that. PLO said that in 64. Yes, they said the same. I'm not going to deny it. PLO said that. It's true. I can understand the sentiment, but I think it's wrong. But also, you guys are the ones, we agree on this. I also agree. You guys had used the words earlier that it was supremacy and exclusively that Zionists. Well, I want to answer your question. As you mentioned, Husseini did say that. And I'm sure there's a very substantial body of Palestinian Arabic public opinion that endorsed that. But by the same token, I think unitary Arab states, as you call it, or a Palestinian state, could have been established with arrangements, with guarantees to ensure the security and rights of both communities. How that would work in detail has been discussed and proposed, but never resolved. And again, I think Jewish fears about what would have happened, a second Holocaust, that's what we're talking. Well, no, I think that was the Jewish fear, a second Holocaust. That may well have been the Jewish fear. It was an unfounded fear. It was unfounded. Of course it was unfounded. What about in 48 and 56? You really think that the Palestinians, had they won the war, were going to import ovens and crematoriums from Germany? I kind of read that in Benny Morris's voice, but that was Rabbani. You really think that the Palestinians, had they won the war, were going to import ovens and crematorium from Germany? I don't know about that, but there were pogroms in almost every single Arab state where there were Jews living after 48, after 56, after 67. There were always pogroms. There were always flights from Jews from those countries to Israel afterwards. I don't think it would be... I wouldn't say there were always pogroms in every Arab state. I think there was a flight of Arab Jews for multiple reasons. In some cases, for precisely the reason you say. If you look at the Jewish community in Algeria, for example, their flight had virtually nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict. The issue of Algerian Jews was that the French gave them citizenship during their colonial rule of Algeria, and they increasingly became identified with French rule. And when Algeria became independent, and all the French ended up leaving out of fear or out of disappointment or out of whatever, the Jews were identified as French rather than Algerian. This is a bit of a red herring. There were no pogroms in the Arab countries. In Bahrain, even where there's almost no Jews, there was a pogrom in 1947. There were pogroms. This is a bit of a red herring. So Algeria is a red herring, he says? There was a pogrom in Aleppo in 1947. Every once in a while, this automatic, transcript will occasionally write in the name of who's talking. It doesn't always do it, but it does it sometimes. It's weird. Okay, So anyway, Moyne says, I'm not denying any of that history. There were killings of Jews in Iraq and Egypt in 1948, 1949. I'm not denying any, but the Jews basically fled the Arab states, not for multiple reasons. Not for multiple reasons. I thought you said everything that happens for lots of reasons, and it's not all black and white. They fled because they felt that the governments there and the societies amid which they had lived for hundreds of years no longer wanted them. Who said that? I'm back into it. I was going to end the stream, but I kind of got a third wind.
But I think it's wrong.
But also,
can
you guys
understand
are
that.
the ones.
We agree
you
on
guys,
this. I also
I want
and
to
just to be
answer
clear,
your
you guys earlier,
question.
because you used the words earlier that it was supremacy and exclusivity that the
Well,
Zionist
I
state
want to
was built
answer
on,
your
but-
question. As you Husseini did say that, and I'm sure there was a very substantial body of Palestinian Arab public opinion that endorsed that. But by the same token, I think a unitary Arab state, as you call it, or a Palestinian state, could have been established with arrangements, with guarantees, to ensure the security and rights of both communities. How that would work in detail had been discussed and proposed, but never resolved. And again, I think Jewish fears about what would
a
have
second
happened.
Holocaust. That's what we're
Well,
talking
no,
about.
I think
That was the Jewish fear. A second
that-
Holocaust.
that may well have been the Jewish fear.
Yeah.
It was an unfounded Jewish fear.
It was unfounded?
Of course, it was unfounded.
What about like in
Well,
48 and 56
you
and
really
67?
think that the Palestinians, had they won the war, were going to import ovens and crematoria
I don't know if it
from
would have been
Germany
that bad,
and
but there were
burn? No,
programs
that's-
across in almost every single Arab state where there were Jews living after 48, after 56, after 67. There were always pogroms. There were always flights from Jews from those countries to Israel afterwards. I don't think it would be.
I wouldn't say there were always pogroms in every Arab state. I think there was flight of Arab Jews for multiple reasons. In some cases, for precisely the reasons you say. If you look at the Jewish community in Algeria, for example, their flight had virtually nothing to do with the Arab-Israeli conflict. The issue of Algerian Jews was that the French gave them citizenship during their colonial rule of Algeria, and they increasingly became identified with French rule. And when Algeria became independent, and all the French ended up leaving out of fear or out of disappointment or out of whatever, the Jews were identified as French rather than Algerian.
This is a bit of a red herring. There were pogroms in the Arab countries, in Bahrain even, where there's almost no Jews. There was a pogrom in 1947. There was a pogrom in Aleppo in 1947.
I'm not denying
There were
of that history.
Killings of Jews in Iraq and Egypt in 1948-49.
I'm not denying it.
But the Arabs, the Jews basically fled the Arab states not for multiple reasons. They fled because they felt that the governments there and the societies amid which they had lived for hundreds of years no longer wanted them.
Look, without getting into the details, I think we can both agree that ultimately a clear majority of Arab Jews who believed that after having lived in these countries for centuries,
Oh my God, Benny, shut your fucking ass up. You sound pathetic. You sound so fucking desperate. You sound like a little kid who's like talk to like the twins. It's like, I'm 1 minute older, but I'm older. But like, having lived in these countries for centuries, way before the Arabs arrived there, for centuries, way before the Arabs arrived there in Iraq, for centuries. Like, you fucking baby. Listen, look at him squirming around like a dumb little baby. Little baby man. Adult baby.
Can both agree that ultimately a clear majority of Arab Jews who believed that after having lived in these countries for
Wait,
for
I hate interrupters because especially when it's like, okay, this guy is slowly and calmly stating his conclusion. I have to interrupt him in the middle of it to throw him off so that the audience doesn't hear it because it's going to sound clear and convincing. And we can't allow that to happen. So you notice how he's just interrupting with a different point. He's just trying to one up. He's like, Jews were here first. Jews are here first. Jews are here first. We were here first. Jews are here first. Right? As if European Jews would be in any way relevantly like have a right to the land because of Jewish people from 2,000 years ago or 4,000 years ago or whatever the fuck he's saying. Give me a fucking break.
for centuries.
Wanted them.
Look, without getting into the details, I think we can both agree that ultimately a clear majority of Arab Jews who believed that after having lived in these countries for centuries, if not millennia, came to the unfortunate conclusion that their situation had become untenable.
Yes.
I also think that we can both agree that this had never been an issue prior to Zionism and the emergence of the State of Israel. Look, I'm not.
Pogroms didn't begin.
Ooh, that is a devastating point. You should have interrupted him even harder, Benny. You shouldn't have let him get that one out. That is a very, very interesting point. Delivered cold, right? Because he's like, we can both agree, blah, 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 blah. And he's just going with them. Like, Benny's trying to fight back, but Moeen is actually doing like the judo thing. He's using his opponent's momentum against them, right? So Rabbani's like, look, you and I, we can both agree. And he's like, fuck, he's going to say something that I absolutely can't say that I disagree with, right? He's going to state something that is some factual thing, but he's going to say it in a way that sounds all like really bad for my side, right? So Benny knows he's in trouble. Benny knows he's in trouble. He tried to throw a whole bunch of, he's throwing all these examples at him. There were pogroms. There was a pogrom in fucking, there was a fucking, what did he say? There's a bit of a red herring. There were pogroms in there. Bahrain even had a pogrom, and they weren't even, there was almost no Jews there. Bro, we had pogroms going all over the place, dude. We had pogroms every fucking day. Bro. Moeen's like, I'm not denying any of that. Absolutely there were. There were killings of Jews in Iraq and Egypt. I'm not denying any of that. The Jews basically fled the Arab states, not for multiple reasons. They fled because they felt the governments there were in societies in which they lived and Jews no longer wanted them. Look, without getting into details, I think we can both agree that ultimately a clear majority of Arab Jews who believed that after having lived in these countries for centuries, way before the Arabs, way before the Arabs arrived there, for centuries, way before the Arabs arrived in Iraq, for centuries, if not millennia, right? He's going with him. He's like, yeah, they were there for a long, long time, man. Millennia. We're talking thousands of years. And Rabbani's just taking Benny Morris with him. With his own momentum. They're falling together. And now, he says, their situation become untenable. Yes. And I think we can both agree that this had never been an issue prior to Zionism and the emergence of the State of Israel. That's a slam. Benny, there were no pogroms prior to Zionism. The pogroms didn't begin with Zionism in the Arab world. I think we can. Maybe we got to stop it there. We're getting too far ahead of ourselves. Getting too far ahead of ourselves. We don't want to go through this too fast. We're gonna miss something. But that is a devastating. That is a devastating line of argumentation. And that is a devastating point. Why was it that right when we had the Zionism and the emergence of the State of Israel, that suddenly there's all this violence targeted directly at Jews in all these neighboring countries? Weird how that is. Will they ever find out why that was? Why was it that only that's when they knew it? So what did we learn today? We learned about this guy. What was the guy's name? Husseini. We learned a little bit about Husseini. We read part of the Wikipedia article. Maybe we'll read some more in the future stream. But there's just a lot. Remember, this is not complicated. It's just a lot to untangle. And that's what I'm here to help us do. Untangle this stuff. Now, I believe Moin Rabbani is doing a nice job untangling. He's laying out crisp, clean, labeled cables that go from here to there. Right? And and Norman Finkelstein likewise is here to untangle. These two motherfuckers are here to tangle. They took two to tangle. They didn't need to take two. They didn't need to take fucking Destiny. Although, he's, in a way, I would say, competent at being a disruptive dipshit without outwardly seeming like a disruptive dipshit. Like, if you didn't know any better, if you're not paying close attention, and or you don't know much about this topic, you could watch this and think that Destiny is equally serious and is asking good, tough questions and is listening and exchanging at the same level as all of these men, just in terms of his body language, right? And also maybe even a little bit of his ability to get reactions out of people. And I bet, clever editors can clip some moments that would make him appear to have made a point, right? If you don't know the context, it might sound weird if he said, if he's like, no people would give up their land, and he says, except the people that sold it willingly, right? Like, if without the context, that almost could sound like Norm was saying that none of these individual people ever sold their land or ever would want to sell their land, and then Destiny comes in with the hot, like, booyah, they did sell their land. Got you, you fucking fool, you fucking moron. Clowned him. Like, it's so stupid. Because if you knew the context, you'd know that his little interjection was completely nonsensical and just ridiculous. He was conflating people with a person, with a group of, with a bunch of persons versus a people as in a nation, right? And by conflating those things, the idea of people selling plots of land being equivalent to making the whole place not your country anymore is fucking ridiculous. Oh, you sold a house? Shit. I guess you're fine with none of this not being your country anymore. Well, fuck no. If I walk down the street, I still want to be in my country. What are you talking about? Yeah, dude. I sold half of my farm to this Jewish guy. It's cool. No, I do not want to make this only a country for Jewish people, because then I couldn't be here. It's just so ridiculous on every fucking level. That's the kind of shit that it's like, it can look kind of convincing and kind of good as long as you're only slightly paying attention and you're not giving any critical thought. You could be like, oh, that guy Destiny sounds like he's really good at debates and he like always wins one over. Like, does he? I mean, I think also a lot of the time Destiny is arguing with people who are on the same level of dumb as he is. Right? It's him versus another fucking moron. And if that fucking moron is like a right winger, he's going to have an advantage because all he has to do is like like debunk fucking right wingers. And that's so fucking easy. And there's just it's just like, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Right? But now he's debating people who aren't just fucking right-wing hacks. And his shit just doesn't work. It is not good. Not good at all. So what did we learn today? We learned about that weird dude. We learned about I'm not even within the hour. We mostly started around 25, 24 maybe. Yeah, you're minimizing the anti-Semitic element, is what Benny Morris says to Norm. And that eventually got to the great subject changing with Stephen making the attack that Norm has a very binary thinking. Yes, binary. And Benny Morris goes off of that and says, you talk about black and white. You talk in black and white. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. And no, he's not. He had you fucking pinned against the corner and was slapping you in the dick with your own book. And you could never answer the question. You could never answer the question. Why is it, if you read your book, Righteous Victims, you can read it, you barely find a word. Why is it that you barely find a word about Arabs being motivated by anti-Semitism? Never, ever answers it. He just says, you're thinking in black and white. History is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that. That's his answer. Why doesn't your book That's quite an answer. That's quite a deflection. And then as soon as he does that, he passes it straight to Stephen, who wants to ask 2 quick questions. One of them, a decent question. A second one, a nonsensical question. Or like a hypothetical that... It's fine. It's a what-if question. You could play with your friends. It has no purpose in this debate. It is not offering an argument or a rebuttal or anything. It's not making a point about anything. I think the Palestinians and the Arabs were expelled. They wanted a unitary, federal state. Explicit, sorry. They were explicit. They wanted a unitary federal state. So Rabbani talked about that. Okay, this is about when I stopped color coding. You're saying he deleted the movement, so that all Jews... Okay. Yeah, it wasn't an exclusively Arab state. We have to distinguish that. So, I don't know. I got about 3 minutes, 44 seconds was kind of the focus of today. So, I don't know. Maybe hopefully we'll get through the other parts a little faster. But, I don't know. Something about these few minutes just kind of grabbed me. Held me in. Couldn't get over them. All right. Well, I think it might be time to slip away into the night. And let's let the music take us right away.
You're talking what concepts on history is much greater. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much greater. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that.
Hold on a second, we keep bringing up this lie. The 25.
You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much greater. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that. You're talking what concepts on history is much greater. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much greater. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that. You're talking in a black and white context when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, and lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. You're talking in and lots of things happen. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, and lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. And lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. Don't seem to see that. white. You're talking in black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, and lots of things happen because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, because of lots of reasons. Not one or the other, not one or the other. And you don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that. You're thinking in terms of black and white. You're talking black and white concepts when history is much grayer. Lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, and lots of things happen because of lots of reasons, not one or the other. Because of lots of reasons, not one or the other, not one or the other, and you don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that. And you don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that. And you don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that, don't seem to see that.